tried and we tried. Ignited a spark, it grew into a flame that
Hello,
exploded in the
cyberspace
shadows.
explorers. Looks like we're online. So, we're coming up to the final exciting chapter of the book, The Technological Society by Jacques Ellul. So, welcome, and I hope today's episode is spicy and interesting. I think it will be because Jacques Ellul even surprised me with quite a punchy ending to his book. I didn't really know what to expect. And let us say I was not disappointed with going through to the end of the book. So, just to start off, a couple of news items for today. First, I'll just, for the new viewers to the show, if anyone's just coming in, this book, The Technological Society, talks about how modern society, so at the time of Jacques Ellul, this is mid-20th century, but the thing he describes continues to grow, and I think still persists to this day. This is Jacques Ellul's prediction. And the stream series was motivated by doing a brief analysis of Mark Zuckerberg's recent metaverse stuff. And then this book was recommended to me, so I started to read it, and I found it very interesting. And I began creating these streams to share my findings with you all. So we've made it to the end of this 400 plus page book. So thanks to all who have stuck with the program. And if you know anybody else who might be interested in these topics, it would help the channel if you like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. Okay, so just to get started, a refresher: technique. What is this about? The technological society is characterized by technique. Definition from Wikipedia. Ellul argues that modern society is being dominated by technique, which he defines as a series of means that are established to an end. Technique is ultimately focused on the concept of efficiency. So no matter what you're doing, let's say you're typing on a computer, well, you want to find the most efficient technique so that you could enter characters quickly, you could not get tired, and so on and so forth. Maybe now you're doing typing, but maybe your company in the future will find out that there's a more efficient way for you to enter data than by typing. So maybe instead of typing emails and letters, maybe in the future people will dictate via speech letters. I don't know what's going to happen. Anyways, there's this general idea here of technique. So let's take a news break. In the news here we have a story, kind of techie story, but I don't think it's too hard to understand. Meta, which is now Facebook has become Meta, selects AWS as key long-term strategic cloud provider. What does that mean? Basically, this says Amazon is providing a lot of the key long-term services for Facebook. So if anybody had any illusions about, Facebook, Amazon, they're competing with each other in some sense, it's more like a lot of the big tech companies that we have now, they all have their little domains carved out and they dominate their reflective spaces. There is some, you could say, for example, like Microsoft Windows versus Mac OS. Is that competition? Maybe, maybe not, but then a ton of PC users will use Apple phones, for example. So it wouldn't be like two restaurants, you go to one or the other. One gets your money, the other doesn't. Rather, a lot of these services, they continue to integrate with each other. So I just thought that this press release was interesting to show that even a big company like Facebook, they're not doing their own cloud storage stuff. Instead, they're relying on somebody else to do that service. And let me tell you about how huge AWSs, AWS being Amazon Web Services. I looked it up, their market share. So Azure, that's Microsoft's product. Then Google Cloud, of course, Google, Alibaba, Chinese company. Anyways, here's just a pie chart that I found just searching for this. And so worldwide cloud infrastructure services. AWS 32%, so basically a third of all whatever they measured of cloud infrastructure. Azure behind at 19%, Google 7%, and then other, so probably a lot of company internal and other stuff. But 32%, I mean, that's a huge market share. So the tech world, as opposed to other industries, I think tech in particular is this very concentrated market type of space, because a lot of these software services and products and things, you need to hire expensive programmers and do all sorts of stuff. It's only possible with pretty big concentration of capital, otherwise it wouldn't happen. George says they integrate with each other and with the NSA. Right, we're doing some 4D chess thinking. So you could ask a question like, okay, who would it benefit actually for all these things to be integrated? Because you could think about it this way. Let's talk about cybersecurity for a second. So if all your data is stored in one place versus your data stored in multiple different places, which setup would be a better way to prevent against a huge catastrophe? Okay, it's kind of a no-brainer there, right? If you have your data or your money, whatever you're talking about, and you have it spread out, then obviously even if one goes down, let's say you have it in 8 places, then you still have 7 out of 8 of your things left up. So it might take a little bit more planning and organizing on your part, whereas people might want to integrate everything together. Oh, maybe it affords some convenience. But of course, then if there's only one place that has to fail for things to go down, like their server gets wiped, the power goes down, whatever it is that might happen, then obviously that could spell big trouble. Likewise, too, if like that one party is the government, whoever, then that means that they're aggregating and they have all your information in the same place. So this is one of the reasons why like practicing cybersecurity itself doesn't really interest me, because it's like the very problem is set up by the sorts of companies that would hire you, basically, as opposed to what could we do? What could you recommend your friends to do to just protect yourself? And for like cybersecurity, one thing you could say is like the best cybersecurity is to have no cybersecurity. So if you have a way to arrange stuff such that you don't have to rely on online cloud service, this or that, then you don't have to worry about the cloud getting hacked. It's just like, is Google gonna like change my Greek dictionary that I'm holding in my hand? It's like, no, someone could come over and like scribble something out with a pen, but it's totally decentralized. Once the book's printed, it's printed. Whereas if you have, and you're relying like, oh yeah, I'll just check their website. Well, what if such and such person's website is gone tomorrow because AWS doesn't like them or something? So robust measures. Cool. Reaper says Guten Tag. He says, don't park your cloud on my lawn. All right. I thought we were in the middle of a drought. You could use some moisture on your lawn. Cool. Okay, the next story. So, of course, we got a lot of big stories going on. Like a lot of protests all over the place. A lot of homelessness on the rise. Evictions. Health crises. All sorts of stuff is going on in the world right now that is hitting close to home. For instance, I think with this recent Black Friday, sales figures were way down, stuff like that. So we got a lot of problems. But The Biden administration has issues a new framework for space policy with the focus on climate change. So it seems like while we might have a lot of problems at home, maybe they're preparing a new space for us where we could be free from those problems. I don't know. Very interesting. Let's see what this is about. So the VP's office released a new framework. And we're seeing that word everywhere too. Framework. For U.S. space policy. Oh, just to give some context to viewers. So, for example, I was showing the Build Back Better framework. This word, this buzzword, it's like, what does it mean? Why is it everywhere? And my own analysis of that, looking through the technological society, is that a framework, it has to do with systematically applying measures. So a framework isn't just like this person here, this person there, this person there. Rather, a framework is about having a very specific system where you fund specific things. Like everything is a technique. Everything is programmatic in a way. And we could see that, for example, anything that involves investments and delivering money consistently and stuff, you could programmatically move money, right? If you could enter some lines into a program and then money could come out, then this would be a way in which you have a program, and in this case it might be a literal computer program that automatically does things like fund the sorts of stuff that you want, promotes the things you want to promote, like reward people for going for a walk outside and penalize them for buying gasoline for their car, right? With a framework with a lot of switches and levers to do things automatically, you could do that. So I think, yes, that framework is talking about an increased systematization of a lot of stuff. Anyways, we got space frameworks now. So let's look at the space priorities framework. What does it do? Okay, made up of executive cabinet members, NASA administrator, and leaders in the space industry. The council's goal is to advise on how to set up the space agenda and come up with new solutions for current space issues. Is more housing and bigger houses, is that a space issue? Oh. Jokes. Okay, refining launch and licensing regulations for space companies launching rockets and satellites. Ways to maintain U.S. leadership and competitiveness in space. Strengthening cybersecurity in space. So now cyberspace and space are getting merged. Reaper says earlier, it was the first time Adobe saw a decrease on big shopping days since it first began reporting e-commerce data in 2012. But consumers spent far more between November 1st and November 28th. Okay, interesting. Yeah, maybe I haven't looked at the specific sales data. I don't really research retail that much. But I could imagine that a lot of people, they spread out their, instead of like concentrating their spending on a particular shopping holiday, hoping to get a good deal, if rather companies and stuff, they had like month-long campaigns and stuff, and people spread out like a buying volume over that longer period, that I could understand how that trend might come about. So it seems like that's the sort of thing you're talking about here, Reaper. Would make sense. In any case, it doesn't detract from the fact that there does seem to be a lot of trouble around, such as supply chain problems and things like that. Okay, Reaper says, also in-store sales up 48% Y over Y. So one might say Black Friday sales are actually effectively up because they held their line from last year when way less people shopped in-store. Okay, Y over Y, I think you mean year over year. Cool. All right, let's quickly look at how space is going to be used in the fight against climate change, because I'm wondering how this fits. Probably something about developing new technologies that can be applied on Earth, but let's see. Okay, open dissemination of Earth observation data will support both domestic and international efforts to address climate change. So you got big cameras up there, and then by monitoring and watching stuff with eyes in the sky, you could therefore use that data to keep people from doing the bad stuff that kills the planet. Anyways, new framework for space policy. Cool. Then just two more news stories. So I was looking at YouTube, and I found this article on the YouTube blog, top trending videos and creators. And don't worry, we're going to relate all these to the Technological Society. One of these was particularly interesting to me, so I'll just read the title of some of these. So Mr. Beast, he says, I spent 50 hours buried alive. I think this Mr. Beast person, he does a lot of like stunt things, and then he does philanthropy. He like organizes and gives away a bunch of money. Then we have a Minecraft speedrun game, so people playing the Vigi games. Glitter bomb trap catches phone scammer who got arrested. Is that like a literal glitter? Like an explosion with a lot of colors? Alright, dude with a backward hat. Probably talking with a spammer. And then some kind of silly showy way, fart spray to do something. Alright. NFL, so football. Okay, this was the one that I thought was really amusing. I'll show it for a moment. So if any of you guys are from like the 90s or the early 2000s, you might be familiar with a game called DDR, Dance Dance Revolution. So people would like dance by following a program and like stomping on arrows in a pattern. Anyways, it looks like this dude is playing a game which operates similar to DDR with the same arrow concept. But this game that he's playing, Friday Night Funkin'.
Whoa! Whoa!
Okay, so I found this like, in terms of language communication, Technological Society is very, it's very abstract. Let me try to explain it on a number of points. So first off, it's taking something like music or dance, whatever. You could blend those two together to an extent, and it's turned it into a game. So it's not just like, oh yeah, you're listening to music and vibing a bit. It's a game with scores and stuff. You're trying to win. George says, careful you don't get copy strike. Yeah, that's why I didn't play the sound too long, and I paused the video. Good morning, though. YouTube pro tip. Okay, so this thing, it's turned music into a game. Now, why would you turn something into a game? We've talked briefly on this stream about this idea of gamification, which is big stuff. Very in the social sciences, psychology, and all this, tons of stuff on gamification. So I'll just read briefly here. Gamification is the strategic attempt to enhance systems, services, organizations, and activities in order to create similar experiences to those experienced when playing games in order to motivate and engage users. So that's the main thing. It's like people think just going on a treadmill is boring. So if we could have a way in which to turn some activity that we think is beneficial to people, and we'll get into what beneficial means later in this stream, but you turn something into a game, then suddenly paying your taxes is a game. Well, then I'm not going to, fail to pay my taxes. I'm going to rush, and I'm actually going to have a lot of fun paying my taxes. Gamification. So this thing, it's like gamified music such that maybe normally you would only listen to one of these tracks once or twice or something. But then if it's a game, then you might listen to it hundreds of times while also doing an activity that really gets you engaged. Okay, so that's the first thing that was interesting to me, gamification. Second is the aesthetics of this. So as you can see, it's like very cartoony, not realistic, but it's like, is it for kids? Is it for adults? It's kind of ambiguous, right? Because you have like some cartoon lady showing some leg action, and you have like these devils dancing in the background, but then it looks really goofy, and it's also super colorful. So I'll just bring up to the image of the corporate art that we could take a look at. So in some ways it resembles the corporate art style. So why would anybody ever interact and engage with the corporate art style? So you see lot of bright colors, and also too, you tend to have people that are being like really like smiley and enthusiastic looking. That's another feature. And then we go to this game, right? All these people are kind of smiley looking. Yeah, George says demonic characters, and I mean clearly, look, they got horns. Look, glowing red eyes. It's not very much of a stretch to say that's the case. Okay. Now listen to the sound.
Oh my god, bro! This song is hard!
So each of these characters has like a different voice, but they're not saying words. It's just like patterns of sound, which it has a similar thing because they're probably electronically generated to the Vocaloids that we've mentioned sometimes on this stream. So these were popularized by the Weeaboo Japanimation fans. Here's a cosplayer. Or is that... Okay, the person looked... Okay, I couldn't even tell. I was like, is that a mannequin and stuff? But I think it's actually a person dressed up in a costume. Anyways, voice synthesizer type software stuff. So it has like a Vocaloid type sound. But they aren't saying words. So even a Vocaloid thing will have lyrics. But it's just like, it's pure melody, it's pure pattern.
Yes. So you gotta do the good.
Let's see. George says it looks more like some kind of graffiti art. Yeah, well, okay, so then we could even ask this question. So does the corporate art actually look kind of like graffiti art in a way? So I think it does, yeah, it does very much look like a lot of this graffiti. And that's what they're trying to do. It's like this street type vibe, right? Sitting on some speakers, chilling with some urban sunset, got some sneakers showing off. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, wild stuff. Anyways, so just asking, let's ask the question. In what forms do you see the technological society coming to fruition? I mean, the dude here in this video is a grown man on his computer. Now, granted, I'm a grown man on my computer and I'm looking at music cartoons and stuff, but I'm not getting 21 million views.
I'm out of breath, man. What's up, people? What's going on? Corey Kitchen here, and welcome.
Anyways, I just saw this, and I'm not just pulling out some random obscure video, okay? I think that's the main point I want to get across. This is not some random obscure video. This is from YouTube's top trending. So this sort of thing, we look at it and we kind of step back and it's like, what? What in the world is that? And Yeah, number 5 on the YouTube official blog 2021's top trending videos and creators. And clearly, if YouTube wants to demote something, they could demote something. The term for that is shadow banning. But this sort of content we just saw, they don't want to shadow ban it at all. Reaper says corporate art is not equal to graffiti at all. I mean, obviously they're not the same. They're different styles. Like, you could clearly recognize that. But I think there are a lot of similarities. Like, I'll just name one. One of the things is pasting some name or some word really big. So both like graffiti, you'll have like your tag name, tagline, whatever, and you'll put it really big. And then of course corporations and stuff, they put up their logos, and they have like a sort of theme or something that they put really big. So I think that there are clearly some ways in which they're similar. I might also add that there's a lot of like state sanctioned graffiti around all over the place. And like, people will pay to have graffiti. So recently, this BLM movement became quite popular. But if I search, like, let's search BLM street art or mural, something like that, then what you'll find is a lot of graffiti art style stuff. Well, here we even have, like, they're trying to do the hippie psychedelic things. But like all over my town, I walk around town and I could see all these sorts of things like this, which are not free to create. And clearly they got a bunch of graffiti art stuff going on. And they're on, like, they might be on the side of a bank or something. Reaper says there are tons of on-purpose graffiti art in Denver and Colorado. Yeah, like, I think, for example, I'll just look at this one image here, where it's just one dude with a spray can. That looks right here like it's either they're just sketching it in or that's organic. But when you see like a professionally done, realistically rendered art piece with some advanced brush techniques and stuff, then it's like, yeah, it looks like it was professionally done versus just somebody that's doing graffiti. Reaper says there are cities that pay people to make art over bad graffiti. When people don't make art but just write bad words in the wrong place. Yeah, I think too that's a good analysis as well. So if you got a brick wall, instead of like sandblasting it or however they clear off a brick wall, you might instead pay to cover what might be graffiti under this with a message that you want to show. Something like that. So I'll actually add this to our list of future topics, looking at graffiti, and let's say corporate appropriated graffiti, something like that. Might be an interesting topic to explore in the future. Reaper says, is graffiti that is paid for still authentic? I don't have enough street cred to answer that question, so I'm not going to answer that question. Okay. The next thing. DAO. Decentralized Autonomous Organization. So I saw this story that Elon Musk's brother, so Elon Musk, he's got the big bucks, and having read his biography, I think he's been doing business with his brother for a while. So they're not like on separate paths. They're literal family and probably working together on things. But here there's something, Big Green DAO, disrupting philanthropic hierarchies. What's this about? Big Green is a USA 501c3 nonprofit that believes growing food changes lives. We launched a DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization, as an experiment in democratizing and decentralizing our grant making. So why is that interesting? Well, just to look at this, so democratizing, decentralizing, it's going to probably have something to do with like blockchains and maybe even anonymous contributions to this. But this idea here of even anonymous grant making could mean that this organization autonomously gives people or parties money. So a system that automatically could review and process grant applications and pay out, and there's no people that are actually here. Rather, people could just put money into it and it pays out if people believe in the cause. Seems that's what they're trying to do. So growing new futures, disrupting hierarchies. What's it about? The Big Green DAO is a first of its kind experiment to radically reconceive and restructure grant making, disrupting embedded power structures by putting nonprofits in the driver's seat. Let's see, the Big Green DAO is controlled by grantees and donors. Everyone gets the same vote. Let's see. So are they going to say, where's the thing about, oh, here's what I was looking for. So a DAO, decentralized autonomous organization, is a blockchain-based organizational structure in which there is no central decision-making authority. Instead, governance decisions like how funds are used are distributed and even automated. A DAO is commonly described as an internet-native business that is collectively owned and managed by its members. In other words, it's a digital collective or cooperative. DAOs typically have a central treasury, which no one individual has the authority to access or control without approval of a larger group. And decisions are made through proposals and votings to ensure members in the organization have a voice. And then it's talking about how they're growing. Oh, this is worth reading. I'll read it. The prevalence of DAOs has significantly increased in recent months and years, with new collectives arising all the time. DAOs currently exist in three primary fields. 1, skill-based cooperatives, for example, Web3 development groups. 2, DeFi, decentralized finance organizations like Uniswap or Olympus DAO. And 3, NFT, non-fungible token, and cultural collectives. For example, Decentraland DAO, the largest metaverse on the Ethereum blockchain. Okay, so why is this thing interesting? So looking at the future, talking about Jacques Ellul, the technological society, then we could see how increasingly autonomous processes are being rolled out, such that a lot of business or things that people would have to do, people interacting with people, less and less so. You could do it in a different way, interacting with an app, or who knows what will come after an app, a VR headset, some kind of AR thing. And these DAOs, to me, it's interesting because it's saying, what if like a company or something lived on the blockchain? That sort of idea, where it's right, democratization in the sense that these projects will be kind of open, like all sorts of different people could contribute to it. But then also, I haven't looked at how this one in particular is structured. Of course, it's like a company, if some one person owns the majority of the shares, then it's democratic in a sense, but the person with most of the shares is able to control it. So it's like, does your vote or your voice really matter? Like effectively, especially for like a really big company, I would say the answer is no. So we might get like tons of these DAOs coming up, and the biggest ones, maybe they'll get a lot of attention, and people will think they're kind of democratic. But if you have like certain organizations, not even like people, but maybe even funds and stuff, that have a huge proportion of the shares, I don't know what they'll call your part that you buy into these DAOs. then they'll be able to determine the directions, objectives, and so forth for those things. Another interesting point. So I thought the name of this was interesting too. So DAO, in Chinese, one common word with that is Dao. And this is the same Dao as and Taoism. So often translated as like the way. Very interesting. Beyond that, the same word Dao, it's also used in the Chinese Bible. And at the beginning of the book of John, it'll say, like, in the beginning. In English, you would say, in the beginning is the word. But in the Chinese translations, they say, in the beginning was the Dao. So the way. So I thought this was a very interesting connection that this engineering creating. So these DAO is a new organization, a new form of doing things based on technology, using crypto, like every single buzzword you want thrown in together to make this new thing. And then it also has the same name, DAO, which would be the pinyin transcription for this Chinese word Dao. And that it's actually the word that is used for word, would be translated as word with a capital W, referring to Christ in the Bible. So it's like they're making their own way. They're MGTOW. Their mechanics going their own way. So what will these DAOs be? Will we be involved with them? I do not know, but my coincidence detector was going off. Just a lot of connections in the names, the imagery, all sorts of stuff of what things look like. And okay, I just wanted to say as well, this connection, this Chinese connection I'm making here, this would not be like a totally unknown, weirdo, far out connection. I'm not like saying, oh yeah, well, in ancient Akkadian it means this, this, and that. As I said, even English speakers will know of the word Taoism, or you might spell it like this, Taoism or Taoism, something like this. It's a very known thing in the West as well. And on top of that, there's Chinese people everywhere. So the fact that you're creating autonomous organizations called DAO, I mean, do you think that no single Chinese programmer in all the world would make the same connection that I made? I think that probably a lot of people did, and that's one of the reasons why maybe this sounds like it could be a, well, in terms of like marketing branding, it could be a very like catchy acronym that isn't really used for anything else very much. It might even help it catch on. George says Taoism. Didn't Microsoft have like Microsoft Tay? They had the Tay bot. All right, we got to look at the Microsoft Tay bot just because George typed Tay. So Microsoft created this AI called Tay, and it's machine learning, so it's informed by the users, what people said. But then shortly after they released it, it started to say things like, "We're going to build a wall, and Mexico is going to pay for it." And it started to say the name of Mustache Man and all sorts of things. So eventually Microsoft shut down this robot. But that's to say, you know, what sort of things happen if someone chooses to kind of crowdsource naively. Interesting. Tay. Okay. Back on topic. So, why look at a book like The Technological Society? I think one of the useful things we could do is, like I was showing here, looking at various news stories. If we want to understand what's going on, like, don't just take a press release, a news story or something at face value, but instead, if we have terms, like ways to look at it, to interpret it, to see why people are doing things, it's not just like a bunch of random people just, oh, we're just all innovating. It's like, that's not how the world works, right? You have people that fund certain initiatives. People are not just all developing in different directions. You have macro directions, bigger directions that people are going into a lot of the time. All right, so before going into book quotes, I just want to bring out this idea, which is going to become relevant here. So I made this clickbaity headline, which is Space Exploration as the Mythology of the Technological Society. So Technological Society, promoting technique, coming up with more and more efficient ways. How is space exploration a kind of official mythology of that? Well, of course, could look at a phrase like space as the final frontier. So we could only make ships that go in oceans bigger, bigger, and bigger. Now we could go all around the globe. We've maxed out on our how cool could we make boats. Okay, now that we've maxed out on how cool we can make boats, where is there left to go? We could visit all the continents. Well, naturally, the final frontier as space presents itself. And I think non-coincidentally, you have lots and lots of people involved in technology generally, also touching space. So, of course, Elon Musk of Tesla has SpaceX, and then Amazon has their space cowboy Jeff Bezos. So let's look at space cowboy Jeff Bezos. Here's space cowboys Jeff Bezos, and there's him inspecting his rocket. So I think his company, like Blue Origin. Right. So, tech guy, business, Jeff Bezos started selling books, selling stories. And now he's making stories. I think he's going places, right? And here too, another cultural thing. There's a subgenre, space western, maybe recently made popular due to this relatively recent Firefly and then the anime Cowboy Bebop. But these two things and the space western subgenre, it could be seen as another expression of this idea of space as the final frontier. In America, of course, cowboys, pioneers settling a difficult land. That's something that has captured the imaginations of many people. A lot of films, books, paintings, all sorts of stuff about cowboys. But now we have space cowboys going into cyberspace. And just another example, so GitHub, I'm going to go to the GitHub website. They're coding computers, that sort of thing, technology. But then what sort of imagery do they present to new users of the site? Well, they have their logo, the Octocat, and some obvious space imagery here. So globe and interconnections, data, all sorts of stuff like this. So code and space, very connected, the technology things. And I wanted to show here too. So I was like listening to some just ambient type of music while preparing for the stream and doing some other work. And you could also find some very clear connections between, I guess, vibes, right? This whole idea of productivity, computers, space, technique, it's all very connected. So here, like, here's a playlist.
Years of wavering emotions, suppressed desires, and volcanic explosions that retreat.
Music for limitless productivity. Stargate Music by Chill Music Lab. So This is playing live. Space code. What would be the context? A lot of people would listen to this. Probably you're at work, you have to do something where you have to focus on some codes or something. I've listened to these, that's why I bring it out, right? So, connections everywhere. Okay, and finally, the cryptocurrencies. There's this phrase, to the moon, that people use a lot, like Bitcoin to the moon, Dogecoin to the moon, and so on and so forth. So crypto, one of the most exciting technological realms now. I think like Jack Dorsey, who recently stepped down as Twitter CEO, he said the stuff that he's going to be moving on to is like cryptocurrency, blockchain, Web 3.0, whatever, all those buzzword type things. Those are the sorts of things that he's going to be looking into. So I just wanted to bring this up too, that the imagery around cryptocurrency, one of the leading technologies, and also all of this space imagery is everywhere. So like Bitcoin on a rocket ship going to the moon, someone showing one of these little price graphs, going to the moon. So endless productivity, limitless wealth. Here's someone having fun with Photoshop, putting the Bitcoin flag. Astronaut chilling with some Bitcoin cake. Yeah, and also even too, this idea of mining. So if I search stuff like, I'm just going to type in the term like asteroid mining, I'm probably going to get a lot of like official publications. If asteroid mining isn't just, who would ever think about it? Is it just out there? No. There's an official Wikipedia page on asteroid mining. So here we have an artist's conception of asteroid mining. That Earth there looks awfully disc-like, but it's just an artist's rendering. So big, long Wikipedia article actually on this asteroid mining stuff. And of course, you get a lot of people spending much time and effort visualizing asteroid mining. So, these are things that people spend a lot of time and energy on. Why, you may ask? And that is why I suggest it's something like the mythology of the technological society. So people might spend a lot of time and effort, for example, to make a statue of a Greek god, right? So in the same way, people are spending a lot of time and energy to support this idea of humans going off into space. Oh, and another thing too about like Greek gods. Notice how lots of stuff in space, that they're all named after Greek gods or various myths, maybe Roman names too. I can't keep them straight. All right. So the space aesthetic as well, it fits with the futuristic visions of the technological society. So in the last chapter, chapter 5, Jacques Ellul wrote, "The human being was created to breathe the good air of nature, but what he breathes is an obscure compound of acids and coal tars. He's created for a living environment, but he dwells in a lunar world of stone, cement, asphalt, glass, cast iron, and steel. The trees wilt and blanch among sterile and blind stone facades." So here, saying what is the look of the technological society? Well, the spaceship stuff, it's like a perfect embodiment of that aesthetic. A pretty high production value channel that you might want to look at to understand the extent to which people have been thinking about exploring and telling stories about the space exploration final frontier narrative is this YouTube channel, Isaac Arthur. So here is this title, Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur. New episodes every Tuesday morning. And I think this fellow has a whole team. Anyways, these videos, if you want to learn about, okay, like I just brought up asteroid mining. So he's got a video on asteroid mining. And then He's going to piece together all this footage and explain about, like, the story of how it would work.
Recoverable objects. Ones that would take very little fuel to bring home, or to bring bits of home, which is probably worth addressing. I have often heard it suggested we might tow asteroids back to Earth orbit. I have no idea why we would do that. We have got plenty of rock down here on Earth, and plenty more on the moon, and way too much junk kicking around in our orbit already without adding more. Why send home a megaton asteroid, the super majority of which has no value down here, when you can extract what you want there and just send that home, saving a lot of fuel?
So why would you bring an asteroid to Earth? I'm not gonna spend my money to bring an asteroid to Earth, so I'll let somebody else answer that question. Anyways, this is to say, so I bring up like Biden's space framework thing, and then this imagery, and bringing up Jeff Bezos and Elon and all these people to say that the outer space stuff in our day-to-day life, like what's happening on the moon, it really doesn't affect us. Yet it's a huge, huge, huge industry. Tons of money goes into this. So we could look at a space budget globally. So africanews.space here, March 10th, 2021. And then we'll just look at the United States, because we are American centric. Okay, so the budget approved for NASA for 2021 is US dollars 23.3 billion, a 3% increase from 2020. So 23.3 billion for a year. Keep that in mind. And then I wanted to contrast that with the number, compare those numbers with Amazon Web Services, which had a revenue of $13.5 billion for quarter one in 2021. So, okay, Amazon Web Services, huge. We all interact with Amazon Web Services probably every day, especially if you work in something peripheral to tech. And in one quarter, so let's just say how many financial quarters are there in a year? Probably 4. That's why they're called quarters. Anyways, that's to say their budget is, the money they bring in is pretty comparable to the NASA budget. Yet we all interface with them every day, meaning Amazon Web Services, and they're regarded by us as like being pretty huge. Yet Amazon's profits compared to NASA's just budget, they're very comparable, put it that way. So I thought that was interesting to say, Now, let us suspend our bickering. So the point I'm trying to make here is not to say like, wow, that money could be put to better use. Let's step back and not go onto the level where like it's you have $20 and I have $20. How should I use $20? Because we're looking at much bigger bigger scale than that. Instead, we could look at how money, economy, stuff like this, it serves a function within a technological society, or any society. But the technological society has a more tight grip on what money is and where it goes. So what is that being used for? And that's where I'm, again, going here with my soft thesis of space exploration as the mythology of the technological society. When we promote technology, including like spacefaring, sponsor videos about asteroid mining, all this stuff, getting people to think about that stuff, what's the effect of that? Well, one of them could be like national pride. So people are saying like, oh yeah, we're now a spacefaring nation, right? People might be very optimistic or happy to think of themselves as being part of an advanced civilization. So it's like, oh yeah, you guys have better, I don't know, food than us, but are you a spacefaring civilization? So an American might be very proud to say like, oh yeah, well, we went to the moon. I've heard a lot of people say stuff like that before. Also, too, justification for developing all sorts of new technologies or techniques. So, for example, if you design a pod that somebody could live in for a 6-month journey to Mars, well, that could be very useful if they want you to live in a pod for your next home. Then they could work on their pod technology. I think there's a lot of examples of like NASA type stuff that eventually went to consumers. I didn't prepare a look at that here myself, but if anybody does know some good examples of that, feel free to share. And then my final one here is the end point for the concentration of capital. And this is saying like, okay, you do concentrate a bunch of money, whether through government or corporations or something, then what's your end game? You could only have a house that's so big. You could only have a yacht that's so big or whatever. I mean, once people get to a certain level of rich, what is there left to do with that money? What sort of projects could you promote? What are you about? You have this huge pile of wealth. Now what do? And well, it seems like a lot of it goes into this science and technology type stuff. So that's that. Right. And going in, looking at this technological society stuff, I just want to point out that there's a lot of very strange parallels, coincidences between stuff like entertainment, special effects, and what we're told we're able to do in space. So I just want to show really quick here, like Disney recently made this thing, the Space 220 restaurant. And what this restaurant is, it's a simulation of you ascending up a giant like a pole or a pillar to go to space. So I'll skip to some video footage. So they make the simulation like you're going up and doing all these things. So here's a bunch of guest viewers that are watching their ascent. And then, so it's a simulation, right? Simulation. And then, you know, they got technologies showing like how they might have a farm. This is some kind of farm in a spaceship. And then they have you in this restaurant and they show you through all these windows like a simulation of what you're seeing in space. So recently Disney made this exhibit, right? And then here's some people just chilling in fake space. Because they tell us it's fake. Here, it's in a restaurant that we're told is a simulation. Right? So, it's like it's looking out, look at the stars, see the Earth, all sorts of stuff like that. So that's at Walt Disney World. So we're seeing like these simulations, these experiences being created. And then meanwhile at Facebook, their lab, their research development, they call it reality labs because they're trying to work on making virtual and augmented reality. Now, just imagine you are a very rich person and you buy a $15 million ticket to be one of the first people to go on a space tour. And they, you know, strap you up, you go in a pod and stuff, and then they tell you something like, well, you know, you're going to be able to look out of the windows here. And it's actually a screen because, you know, to make the capsule strong enough with the ion bombardment, you know, some technical jargon, that's the only way. But we have a camera right on the outside. It takes a video and it real time projects it in the screen. So yeah, you're going to be able to watch your journey into space. So then they put this this rich person in this capsule, and then they shake the capsule up and they do all these experience things, tactile sensation, VR, AR. They use the best of this technology, and then this person believes that they went to space. You pocket $15 million, and then they're done, and it's like, wow, how did you enjoy your space journey? And they step out and they're like, whoa, that was amazing, so on and so forth. It's like, yeah, our job is to sell experiences. My question to you, did that hypothetical person, did they just get scammed? Did they get the experience they bargained for? Or is there something deceitful in that transaction? You tell me. Okay, Reaper says, justification for a new tech is just research. Stuff comes from it. Typically, you don't know what will. One might argue you do it for the same reason that you write a fictional work or draw a painting. Yeah, Reaper, you bring up a good point here. And I think this is one of the things that Jacques Ellul is talking about in the Technological Society. And actually, this is a great transition as we're going to get into the book. To say, all right, technological society, it's moving forward, technique, you're optimizing all these things. But what is your ultimate end game? Why are you doing all these things? So let us dive into the text. So now we're looking at the final chapter, chapter 6, the look at the future chapter. So here's a quote. Jacques Ellul is going to present the technological society as a sort of inevitable development. He says, we have completed our examination of the monolithic technical world that is coming to be. It is vanity to pretend it could be checked or guided. So with this line, vanity to pretend checked or guided, it's like the thing has already been unleashed. This reminded me of the language that's used with the artificial intelligence singularity. So I'll just bring up this article here. Singularity, what is the technological singularity? It's a hypothetical point in time at which technological growth becomes uncontrollable and irreversible, resulting in unforeseeable changes to human civilization. So, for example, you make a smart AI thingy that could develop more technology. The AI itself develops more technology, and more technology that could develop more technology. You've unleashed the thing. It's like a forest fire that just grows. Exponential growth, potentially. But it's not of a forest fire. It's of technology. So Jacques Ellul presents the technical world as that sort of thing, like the singularity but being unleashed. It's vanity to pretend it could be checked or guided. All right. Then he's talking about how this new society operates by its own rules. So the technological society is different from what I'll call like the natural world. So he says the new milieu has its own specific laws, which are not the laws of organic or inorganic matter. Man is still ignorant of these laws. So just thinking of, in an increasingly technological society, what might be some examples of how things operate differently from the natural world. So like one thing I did recently is like booking a flight. So when you book a flight, more miles doesn't mean it's more expensive. In fact, like to go from one city to another city, it might be cheaper to like transfer 2 flights and go in a complete circle, and maybe it'll even take longer, but that might be actually the way to get the cheapest flight. Right. Then there's an example of something that's like a financial derivative. So you have some system that has all sorts of rules, and then you could get some absurd ideas, seemingly absurd ideas. Like I think last year we saw oil prices go negative, something like that. So what does it mean for prices to go negative? You could go in and research what that means, but basically it's like something that would normally be kind of contradictory, like negative oil prices. What does that mean? Does that mean I get $37 for free from the oil company? What does that mean? You could get these derivative, like fact things, whatever you want to call it, that happen that seem absurd, but they're by the rules of the system that's in place, so that's why they're possible. And then finally, as an example of a way in which the technological society has different rules than like the natural world, is difficult things have become easy. So to share a message with 1 million people, so YouTube, for example, huge service, big scaling. So is it possible for like 1 million people to view this video by tomorrow? Like, I think technically it's entirely possible. What would prevent that from happening is not technological constraints, it's other things. On the other hand, easy things have become difficult. On the other hand, so this video by tomorrow, very technically easy for 1 million people to view this video. If that were to happen, like, I would be surprised, but it totally could happen. On the other hand, could I buy a house tomorrow? Let's suppose I even have the money up front to buy that house. No, basically I can't, because there's going to be all sorts of legal and other things that are in the way. Even if that house were like right next to me or something, it just it wouldn't be possible. Like, I could stay somewhere else, but the legal transfer of ownership and stuff, it wouldn't happen that fast. Okay. So the technological society has its own rules, own ways of operating, and this way it creates a sort of abstraction layer. So here's a quote: "In our cities, there is no more day or night, or heat or cold, but there is overpopulation, thraldom to press the television, total absence of purpose. All men are constrained by means external to them, to ends equally external. The further the technical mechanism develop, which allows us to escape natural necessity, the more we are subjected to artificial technical necessity." So you may have heard people say something like, oh, what would be something that's good for you to do? And they might say like, oh, just do a little bit of work with your hands, or just go up, take a hike, go for a mountain, go to the mountains, do something like that. And why might this be good for you? I think because interfacing with the natural world as people, then naturally you put in some work, like going up a mountain, and then you stand at the top of a mountain, and then you look down. Just because of how we're made, then there's a reason why these things are refreshing to us. Whereas on the other hand, a lot of the times the activities that we do in technological society land, it's like, what work did you do today? Well, I entered in a bunch of data. Well, what was that data being entered in for? Well, it's necessary for this proposal. Well, what is the proposal for? It's like, well, we have to do this in order for this to happen. Well, so there's all sorts of layers that might obscure. It might be much harder to see how what you're doing actually contributes to something in a way where you go and lift weights. The reward is yours very, very quickly. You put in some pain and then you get some gain out of it. Whereas the technological society, you're typing stuff at a computer. How does that translate to value? It's much more abstract. It's operating by different rules. So for most people, the work we do doesn't give us food, shelter, etc. Instead, we get money, and then with money, you could do stuff with money, but layers of abstraction, layers of different. I won't even call it layers of abstraction. It's more like just layers that you have to operate with. Okay. Then I wrote a little paragraph here, which I'll read. "Consider again how a lot of technological development started, creating machines to produce more, thereby giving us more leisure." So maybe that's why you would, a lot of people develop machines. It's like doing laundry takes a lot of time, so I'll invent a machine to help automate laundry, so I could process more laundry more quickly, so on and so forth. So what would be the goal of that? Well, maybe so then you could free up some time to do something else. However, Rather than finding more rest, we find that through expanding the technological society, we become increasingly drawn into the program of building and extending the technological society itself. So you do one thing, you speed up the laundry process, then you find yourself looking at a different technical problem, and you're not working any less. It's just the nature of what you're doing is changing. You're doing increasingly technical stuff. So what is the end game of the technological society? Quote from Jacques Ellul. The required solution then must be a technical inquiry into ends, and this alone can bring about a systematization of ends and means. And then here's my paragraph. Why? Can you use technique to figure out the purpose of life? Applying technique is done with the assumption that you already know what your goal is. Technique itself cannot find what technique is for. Likewise, a video game can give you objectives at any given moment. So a video game, there will always be some kind of win condition in order to keep you engaged. For example, oh yeah, I just have to survive for 30 seconds. Oh, I have to eliminate as many of these enemies as I can, something like that. However, a video game cannot give you a factual answer as why you should be playing it. So a video game could say, like, you got high score, you got you did better than the last time you played, but the video game can't tell you like why you should get a high score, something like that. So it seems that can you even have a technical query into ends? I don't think so, probably, but that's a sort of issue that Jacques Ellul brings up about the technological society. Okay, then the last section of this book, he called it a look at the year 2000. So he's writing this from 1954, mid-20th century, so he's looking about 4 decades ahead. And this is where I was actually quite intrigued by how this book ended. So first, Ellul starts by looking at various predictions of his contemporaries, and essentially he's not going to address a lot of the specifics of their predictions for the future. He calls what they're saying empty platitudes, and he says they lack an understanding of human reality. So here's a quote from Jacques Ellul. He says, "None of our wise men ever posed the question of the end of all their marvels. The wherefore is resolutely passed by. The response which would occur to our contemporaries is, for the sake of happiness." So Ellul's claiming that, at the end of the day, why are people making all of these technologies? Well, in some capacity, in order to be happy. So what is this happiness that Jacques Ellul is suggesting that people are going for? And we have a quote. "Unfortunately, there's no longer any question of that. One of our best-known scientists in diseases of the nervous system writes, 'We will be able to modify man's emotions, desires, and thoughts as we have already done in a rudimentary way with tranquilizers.'" Then my note here, my question. So we have technologies to make people numb or to put people to sleep, making pain go away for a while. But could technology bring happiness? It's a question that I have. And here, Jacques Ellul says, "It will be possible, says our specialist, to produce a conviction or an impression of happiness without any real basis for it." So think happy drugs, like the Soma drug in Brave New World. Oh no, it looks like it's an actual... someone actually made a drug called Soma. Okay, we gotta search Brave New World. Let's look up Soma. Okay. So a happiness-producing drug called Soma is one of the big things that's used in this book, Brave New World. Which maybe we could do a study on here if people are interested. Maybe we'll look at it. Anyways, happy drugs. Okay, our man of the golden age, therefore, will be capable of happiness amidst the worst privation. Why then promise us extraordinary comforts, hygiene, knowledge, and nourishment, such as, wow, we were able to build a rocket ship, we were able to go into outer space. Oh, wow, we were able to build this giant bridge. All these things that people might do. Hygiene, knowledge, and nourishment. Why would you do this if, by simply manipulating our nervous system, we can be happy without them? The last meager motive we could possibly ascribe to the technical adventure thus vanishes into thin air through the very existence of technique itself. So it's like, is the objective to make flying cars, all these things that people might speculate about there being in the future? Then Jacques Ellul is saying, like, ultimately, the people will just want to engineer happiness of some kind. And then he says, if that could be done through drugs, something like that, then why wouldn't that be the ultimate endpoint? Maybe that's actually the most efficient way, is to get rid of all these fancy big things that could break in all sorts of ways. And if you're just able to hack the nervous system directly and produce a result that way, maybe that's the end game. And this reminded me of this character from the film The Matrix named Cypher. So here's Cypher at his computers. You get those cyberpunk aesthetics. So I'm assuming everybody is at least knowledgeable about the premise of The Matrix. And I'll just pull up one image of the Morpheus red pill, blue pill image scene. So I'll just read this. The terms red pill and blue pill refer to a choice between the willingness to learn a potentially unsettling or life-taking truth by taking a red pill, or remaining in contented ignorance with the blue pill. The term refers to the scene from The Matrix. So in this film, The Matrix, the protagonist is offered a choice. Do you want to take the red pill or the blue pill? What do you choose? And then in this clip, then this one character, Cypher, he spends all this time analyzing The Matrix, studying The Matrix. And then he asks, well, he basically expresses that he wished he took the blue pill. He's like, why did I take the red pill? He's sitting here getting truth bombed. His life is very hard, very difficult. And it's saying, why can't I just have had just blissful ignorance instead of having all these difficulties of his life, sitting here doing all this? Why couldn't he just have taken the blue pill? He expresses that sentiment. So, final quote here. But what good is it to pose questions of motives, of why? All that must be the work of some miserable intellectual who balks at technological progress. The attitudes of the scientists at any rate is clear. Technique exists because it is technique. The golden age will because it will be. Any other answer is superfluous. And that is the concluding line for the technological society. So it's saying, at the end of the day, you guys just want to engineer happiness, and the most efficient way might be through like brainstem and happy drug. And if people ask you why, then it's like the why is technique exists because it's technique. And so this is Reaper is just stepping right into this conversation, because earlier, let me find in the chat what Reaper said about technique when I was ranting about spaceships. Where is what? Scroll. Justification for new tech is just research. In the sense that, why are you making new tech? Well, research, and then research might produce new technology. So technique exists because it's technique. The golden age will be because it will be. It's just like, it is what it is. Let's just keep on doing technology, is the kind of answer that's given. All right. Reaper says, is it legitimate to say Ellul is a negative Nelly? We'll think about that. Reaper says, the Matrix you see in movie 1 is not the real Matrix, but a fake one that gives people in the Matrix hope that they can rebel and win against the real Matrix, i.e. the entirety of movie 1 is virtual. To this we must ask, perhaps we should all be trying to rail against the negative aspects of society Ellul identifies, whether or not we are successful. Yeah, so I think a long time ago I might have seen some of the sequels to The Matrix, but I won't get into plot spoilers here. Might have to check out those films again. But yeah, that's just to say, okay, so a little, you could say he gives like a diagnosis. He describes the situation of what the technological society is like. Then so if you accept like his analysis, his description of how things are is he's saying a lot of useful things, a lot of what he's saying is true, then I think every person has a choice of how they respond to that. So Reaper says, if I like to bake cupcakes and I have spare time and try some recipe changes, am I somehow automatically sucked into this never-ending technique loop? Well, I mean, I think clearly, like, depending who you are and where you are, your role in all of this is different. So I assume me and the people watching this, most of us are probably just plebeians. We are not people calling the big shots for a lot of stuff. So like, this is not an anti-technological society stream. I'm not saying like reject the technological society in all forms and try to move into the country and live off the land. I mean, I'm doing a live stream as we're talking. We're using technology. We're using the information superhighway grid. We're doing all these things. So I don't think it's bad to use the tools and the techniques that you have available to you. Reaper says, along the same lines, what's wrong with researching electricity or electrical components? Yeah, so I'm saying, like, per se, I don't think that researching or learning about things is bad. But you could ask the question, like, to what ends are you using techniques? What you have tools and techniques in order to do stuff. What is it that you're doing? So in the technological society, Ellul is offering this thesis that the direction in which society that starts to become autonomously technical, so he calls it technological society, maybe once the let's say the technique singularity happens. Okay, then once the technique singularity happens, it's like society is animated in a particular direction, whether we like it or not. And then he speaks about it with big rhetoric, saying stuff like, where is that line where he says, oh, it is vanity to pretend it could be checked or guided. So Ellul is just saying, like, this is how stuff is going. This is how things are going to change. And then likewise, he's suggesting that a logical end conclusion to what the technological society will ultimately be to create sort of smart drugs or an automatic human biointegration into the system. And he went down hard on that position. That's why I was saying I was pretty surprised how he ended this, as opposed to talking about like, oh yeah, well, in 20 years, actually, maybe the technological society will go off the rails and collapse in this way or that way. He didn't say any of that. Instead, he was like, no, it's technological singularity kind of happened, so it's just going to keep on rolling and keep on doing its thing. So I think, like us, just normal people learning about this, I would say we could take Jacques Ellul's description, his diagnosis, see what he's saying about the technological society, and then if things are indeed moving and evolving in kind of the direction that he's describing, now you have taken the red pill, so you're like Cypher in that scene from The Matrix. How do you respond to some knowledge that you have? You don't have to be as confused about why things are going in this or that direction. Now you have like a useful framework. You have a framework. You have a useful model to sort of study and understand how technology drives the organizations of societies. And now I think, like I was bringing up with the news story with the DAOs, the blockchains, all this sorts of things. I mean, like, I think we are living in quite interesting times, difficult times for a lot of people, but certainly stuff's coming up where we see the potential for things to really shift a lot. Just like with the internet and stuff, we've seen huge, major transformations. Okay, Reaper says, yeah, but Ellul's country, meaning France, lost to the Germans after a few days. I say this not as a joke. And his country cycled through democratic revolutions, etc. So there are other societies that kind of have had more longevity and have tamed a bit more of stuff. Like if Ellul was alive right now, he'd lament about so many people gaming for 12 hours a day. However, China's Xi just spontaneously outlawed that, showing just how easy it could be changed. I don't think... Okay, when I'm reading this book, Technological Society, I don't actually see Ellul like lamenting these things. Like I think that, in my opinion, reading his work, he seems to be surprisingly just descriptive about stuff, just saying what he sees, as opposed to saying like it doesn't seem to me like he's giving many value judgments. From my impressions reading this text. But even so, like Reaper, you bring up this example of China restricting gaming. So let's just look at this story. And then I'm also going to bring up another kind of story. So let's say blockchain incentivize exercise. So another question to ask is how... So we have all these new sorts of technologies coming out. It's a technique to apply these things in order to change people's behaviors and to make people content with the system. So, for example, if Xi Jinping of China is using technologies to prevent people from going on computers and stuff too long, does this reflect that the society is becoming less technological? I would argue and say no, it doesn't. It's because the technological society, it's more integrated. The tech is in more places than Xi Jinping, central authority, whoever. Now they have more of an ability to tell people and to like control people's behavior. So in this case, it's like, let's restrict people from doing video games. Now it could work in the opposite direction. So this actually is an older article. I saw 2017. But one of the things that's coming out with these smartwatches, all this sort of stuff, is a lot of parties are trying to figure out ways in which to incentivize people to do behaviors that are supposed to be healthy for them, right? So a government might try to make something where you earn crypto by staying fit. So if they could somehow verify that you're running or doing a workout or something like that, and you could say, like, look, it's not people being glued to a screen for 12 hours, whatever, but what it is, still, it's like digital governance, especially if you have people that are required, whether by a school or, a job or whatever, to wear like a watch or some biometric scanning thing. Then what they could do is use these, to say it's for your own good, right? We have to keep you healthy. We have to keep you, fit, whatever. And then you could require people and have the technology monitor them and basically force people to do things like exercise or like do some silly dance. Like we were looking at those Joshua Fluke corporate cringe all these exercises that people had to do. You might have people do some silly activity that's supposed to be like good or healthy for them in some way. To act enthusiastic, have a good attitude, do something. Do a heel tap, whatever. These are all sorts of things that might come to be. Who knows? Okay, Reaper says, I find some of Ellul's analysis to be cynical. As in, a university philosophy professor would feeling constrained and unable to affect the real world. My pushback is just that I think a lot of stuff going on now is explicit and implicit choice of society not to change or manage stuff better, but that does not mean it is inevitable. There are already tons of health insurance companies that have companies run contests for employees to walk 10,000 steps a day, tracked by a smartphone or smartwatch. Is super common. Yeah, of course. And that's why, like, in the last stream, Jacques Ellul on his whole sport section, he was talking about how sport, it's like the gamification of exercise. So now, especially with companies like, Peloton, there's bikes. People are coming up with all sorts of new ways in order to incentivize people to basically play a game. It's a game controlled by your body, but it is a kind of game in that you do a motion and then there will be certain rewards. Lights will flash and things will happen that will help you track. And the goal of these is with these technologies, then you could encourage people to do activities through gamification, right? Okay, Reaper says, one thing to say about this is in the 1980s, Japanese corps were known for their kind of jumping jack start of the day things. Yeah, like calisthenics type, like let's all get into line and, do some exercise, that sort of thing. Yet here in America is 3 decades later doing the same thing, but in a very hyper tech-based individualistic way. Yeah, Reaper, you bring up a good point here. So we could say that the technique was already developed where you have people do some sort of calisthenics exercise or whatever as a group thing. I mean, this is just like in the military, right? Like in any sort of military training, you're going to make a bunch of people do exercises together, and there's a lot of use for this, including just building people, getting used to being disciplined and following instructions, right? Just for that alone, having people wear a uniform and do exercises on command could be extremely useful. So you could say how with like the Japanese corporate culture, they took many sort of military aspects and they brought it into their corporation culture. In fact, if I just did a search of that, like Japanese corporate culture military, if I search something like that, probably get, how did they change from a military empire into a known for their politeness and stuff. So that wasn't a very good search term. I'll have to try something else later if I want to learn about that. Let's see. Reaper says, so America loses the group cohesion social aspect of it. Yeah, so I think this contrast here between like Japan and the U.S. is pretty interesting. Like, we could just talk about dress, for instance. One thing that Japan is famous for is, their Japanese school uniforms. I won't pull up pictures and make the weeaboos get excited, but this whole idea that, in their school, everyone's dressing in this similar way. It looks uniform, looks nice. Whereas in America, a lot of stuff has been really free-for-all, kind of chaotic. And you could say that through doing that, maybe America has lost out on a lot of potential efficiency, group cohesion, all sorts of different areas. Now, I thought Jacques Ellul, his book touched all sorts of things. In the last stream, the last chapter on psychology, he was talking about a lot of a lot of stuff about how the role of psychological study is to get people integrated and accepting the technological society. So, of course, if everybody has to wear the same clothes and do these exercises together, then, even if they don't feel like they're part of the group, they look like they're part of the group. Just bring up Chinese school uniforms. These Chinese school uniforms, they look like astronauts. Look, here's some Chinese kids. They're like jumpsuits. They look like they're ready to go into the International Space Station. And they're jumpsuits. Like these. More school uniforms. I think these like little red bands, that means they're trying to go into the Communist Party. Yeah, some more people in their tracksuit looking things. Okay, Reaper says, now every tech geeker has a digital bracelet, smartwatch, tracking everything they do. Yeah, hey, this ain't. I'm gonna add this to my list of future topics. Reaper's bringing up this interesting issue of technology and individuality versus more collective culture, and I'll just put in parentheses like Asia as an example. Yeah, it seems like in the United States, a lot of the tech stuff that people do is, hey, how do I configure everything exactly the way I like? Rather than saying like, let's everybody in our corporation has the same sort of computer, so then it's very easy for us to all troubleshoot the same problems and we could be more efficient that way. Like a lot of tech nerd, tech geek types, then they want to differentiate themselves or pride themselves in having their own configuration. Like, oh, you have that smartwatch, this one's actually cheaper but it's better, it has many features in different ways. Or, oh yeah, I actually use an older computer than you, but I have the software set up a particular way, so my computer is really cool. Among like tech nerds to have that sort of talk or differentiation, I think is quite common. Okay, so let us just bring things back to earth. I'll conclude going through my notes here, and then if there's any remaining questions or topics to go over in the chat, I'll get to those. So my sort of mini thesis here was that the space narrative is like in our modern times. This is the kind of our mythology of technological progress. And then even Ellul, he used this word of how the look of the technological society is like a lunar world. A lot of artificial manufactured materials, all sorts of stuff. If humankind could join together to do technique to the max, then we could reach the stars. Literally, right? That's kind of the mythos that is used to motivate people to push the technique, the technology, the research, stuff like that more and more. Right, going along this story, we could see the sort of narratives that are given to us. So let's see, technological progress. So what is the nature of the world? This PBS Space-Time channel would be an example of a place you would go to learn about the current state of what people say space is like, though it looks like 2 years ago for this, so maybe they haven't been updating. Oh no, 2 weeks ago. Okay, 2 weeks ago they were answering if black holes are actually fuzzballs. So I don't know if black holes are actually fuzzballs. But you could watch this man standing in front of computer-generated images, saying a bunch of big words, and talking about the nature of the cosmos. Yeah, so with the space stuff, then it's like this final frontier. So very expansive, things are drifting apart, lots of talk about dimensions, just all this stuff of there's just space. Like that's this very word we have, space, to talk about this. And then you have technology, and that is sort of the skin that goes over you as you proceed into space. Like the space suit is like an extra, it's a suit, it's a skin, and then you're enclosed with spaceship or whatever, and then you're going out into this void and you're doing stuff. And as a sort of to highlight on the mythological aspect of this, there's all sorts of stuff, of course, named after like pagan gods of various sorts. You could even, look at the names of the planets, right? The planets, they bear the names of various pagan gods, like Jupiter, Mercury, and so on. But then like NASA, then they'll take on names like Apollo missions. You could look up who Apollo is. I wanted to bring up too that a lot of the people associated with space stuff, they have kind of spooky associations. So this fellow, Jack Parsons, so he was friends with Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard. Some big things, big name connections there. But this is what I wanted to show is relevant. So this guy who went on to found JPL, NASA, then he was involved with this religion of Thelema. So poached by local Thelemites, the followers of occult religion founder Crowley. The Bacchanalian polyamorous quote practice sex rituals that involve the consumption of blood, beep and beep, believing that beep to be pathways to higher consciousness. So a lot of peak occultist ritual type stuff. Founder of NASA, big, very high profile person in this regard. Then he was associated with the religion of Thelema, which I'll bring up here. An esoteric and occult social spiritual philosophy. And then here's some of their teachings. So do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. So they seek out to do what they want. Then here, every man and every woman is a star. Implies by metaphor that persons doing their wills are like stars in the universe, occupying a time and position in space, yet distinctly individual and having an independent nature, largely without undue conflict with other stars. So this also too has to do with this whole image of the expansive universe. So big expansive universe, you out there, and then you are like a star. And then here, love is the law, love under will, i.e. the nature of the law of the Thelema is love, but love itself is subsidiary to finding and manifesting one's purpose or mission, something like that. So, okay, why bring up and talk about how one of the guys who founded NASA, who has tons of money, why am I bringing up that he did weird stuff? The reason is because I'm talking about how space exploration is kind of like a mythology of the technological society. And here you could even see in the talk what he's saying with the occult stuff. You might say, oh, I don't believe in any of that. That's just superstition. But the language that's being used, it's talking about imagery of stars, individuality, doing your path. The spirituality in many ways is lining up with the sorts of technological projects and thought that is being projected. And then here, so Jacques Ellul's final analysis was that these people are trying, the ultimate end of the technological society is to try to engineer happiness in a sense. And Jacques Ellul's suggestion is eventually the closest thing you're going to get is basically to be like smart drugs of some sort. So how is happiness engineered? And then here's my note. One solution is creating a fictional heaven that you could strive for in the technological society by furthering technique. So technique is the end game, because you believe that through increasing technique, through having all these increased knowledge and so on and so forth, it's kind of like this thelemic thing. Like, you do what you want, developing technique towards the goals that you set for yourself. And then eventually that is their practice and ethic. Then that's the end game for you, is to just go your own way, and to go your own way hard. And yeah, so that's that. Okay, let's look at the pushback from Reaper. Reaper says, why are we talking about JPL Bro's private life or NASA? We're looking at the Wikipedia official narrative. Okay, you can say founder of NASA, but I hear lived in California in the 60s. Yeah, so Reaper here too. We're talking about California, the 60s, all this other stuff. Like, we've mentioned like Leary and the cyberdelics and all this stuff. It's connected in these very surprising ways. That it's like, how do you connect rock and roll, hippies? How does that connect to NASA and the internet? Like, how are these things all connected? And right, we could see that right here, the cyberdelic, from cyber and psychedelic. Here, Timothy Leary, an advocate of psychedelic drug use, who became a cult figure of the hippies in the 1960s. So I bring up Leary because you were saying lived in California in the 60s. And that Google guy we were looking at too on the Google Doodle, the Iranian fellow, he was at Berkeley. Anyways, reemerged in the 1980s as a spokesperson of the cyberdelic counterculture, whose adherents called themselves cyberpunks, and became one of the most philosophical promoters of personal computers. Philosophical promoters of personal computers. You're not just a nerd having fun. There's a philosophy behind it, all right? The internet and immersive virtual reality. Leary proclaimed that the PC is the LSD of the 1990s and admonished bohemians to, quote, turn on, boot up, jack in. In contrast to some of the hippies of the 1960s who were anti-science and anti-technology, the cyberpunks of the 1980s and 1990s ecstatically embraced technology and the hacker ethic. They believed that high technology and smart drugs could help human beings overcome limits, and it could liberate them from authority and even enable them to transcend space, time, and body. They often express their ethos and aesthetics through cyber art. Okay, we got to look at the art, and reality hacking. Okay, Reaper says, yes, but don't forget, don't ask kids of semi-rich people to go to war in a jungle for no good reason. If you ask them to, they'll all drop LSD and smart weirdo pagan cults in response. So a lot of what you are looking at is kind of entirely a protest against Vietnam. But if you were to look at the biography of most astronauts or NASA scientists, you're going to find a bunch of Eagle Scout Air Force captains and MIT rocket scientists. I don't know, like, are you saying that these people were high achievers in their society, whereas a lot of the people that were sent to Vietnam was a bunch of more like average or even low achievers? I don't exactly get what you're suggesting here. But yeah, just thinking about this in kind of technological society terms, we could see how you could get a lot of people from different positions in life, that whether you're rich or you're poor or you're interested in music or computers or whatever, right? There's people that might be interested in a similar idea, and then they're all striving towards like a similar same direction, though in different ways. I don't think that would be weird or surprising. So for example, like, you might get a lot of these tech people, like let's talk about Jack Dorsey, for instance. Like Jack Dorsey, I'm assuming he has some kind of programming background, software programming sort of stuff. But then I think he goes off and practices various forms of meditation and stuff. So his specialty, kind of his rise to fame, might have been maybe he comes from a well-to-do family and he does like technology stuff, but then he becomes interested in talking to people that do like Eastern spirituality, something like that. Okay, Reaper says, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying most people working for NASA don't have weird backgrounds. And I'm simultaneously saying a lot of people, including those same people, were protesting forced war, i.e. the draft. Yeah, so Reaper, let me just make one point to say that if I'm saying some stuff like, oh yeah, Jack Parsons of NASA or something, you know, he's kind of spooky and, you know, it seems like he might be trying to do occult weirdo stuff. That does not mean that everybody that's associated him with the organization is knowingly participating in the same thing. Like, it could be a lot of people saying, like, you know, hey, I see my friend joined the aerospace industry. He gets to go like in cool airplanes and got to drop down on a parachute. That looks like that's something that's cool to do. I might want to do that. So then somebody joins up for those reasons, and they aren't going in there, you know, to get into weird mystical occultists or anything like that. Similarly now, it's just like, you know, NASA's got a huge fat budget. So why might most people get into it? It's probably because they go to school and it's like, oh, it's cool to be interested in science. And then someone starts to study this stuff, and then they apply for a program or a job or something, and then they just work for NASA or whatever, and they do that. So I'm not making assumptions about the people that work for these programs, like just the normal employees and people like that. Rather, I'm saying that in the leadership, you know, these higher up people, especially if in their official biographies and what they say about themselves, they say that they do this, they say that they do that. You know, it's like if Jack Parsons makes himself as a known practitioner of the Thelema religion, and he says, yeah, here's my buddy, you know, Aleister Crowley and stuff, then I don't think it's unfair to say that his practices and relations in that sort of way would influence the way he acts, what he's trying to do, and so on and so forth. Though that's not to attribute bad motives to like just the run-of-the-mill American or whoever who might be working under him. And I'm not calling like, oh yeah, everyone who works for NASA is like a liar or something, because most people are just doing their doing their job, right? So they don't, if they haven't investigated and looked further, then they might not know the degree to the spookiness that they're involved in. Jared Stearns says, hello, what's up, Jared? Reaper says, sure, but why are you mentioning the one weird thing? I mean, I think you were pretty clearly exploring the angle that people promoting space travel might have weird alt religious goals, which could implicitly be against, for instance, establishment Christianity. So, like I said, I'm kind of offering a soft thesis here that space exploration is the sort of mythology of the technological society. And I'm saying that a top person, right, in the foundation talking about this sort of thing, like Jack Parsons, he has these sort of spooky connections. So if he got this sort of spooky program going based on his own occultic beliefs and stuff like that, then that's just to say one reason why it might be so successful and stuff. All this art, imagery, all this stuff everywhere is because it is basically, it's matured as a mythology. So I'll say it that way, that right, space exploration has kind of matured as the mythology of the technological society, if that makes sense. So you could be involved or think about this to various extents. You know, like if you're someone on a MacBook has a space background wallpaper, are they suddenly like some kind of weirdo occultist? Oh, you know, you use a dark theme and you have like space background for your wallpaper. You know, you're summoning demons. No, it's not like that. Though that's to say, a lot of these images, these themes, these artworks, all this stuff that we have around, right? If we look at the history, where they come from, what forms repeat themselves in what places. What could I tell you? There's patterns and things that go way back all over the place. So that about does it for the content that I have here. As I said, this last chapter for the technological society was quite. It was surprising to me how explicitly he was like drug brainstem as sort of the end game. You guys meaning technological society, architects, promoters, engineers, skip all the fantasizing about flying cars and stuff and just go for the brainstem. It's like, whoa, that was rather shocking to me. Okay, Reaper says, oh well, if you want to say there is kind of a futuristic, pseudo-spiritual, transcendental quest, some people working in the space industry or just interest in it, however, then I absolutely agree. However, I'd say that truth, which is probably honestly pretty common, is probably actually divorced from if one or two of them have a kind of specific super weird alt religion. Yeah, well, okay, so let's return to actually talking about fundamentals, so technique itself. So one of the big appeals of technique generally is you have objective measures for saying if you succeeded or you didn't succeed, right? So if I'm writing a program and you're writing a program, and then we put them in the same environment, like let's say we run both of our programs in the same machine, then we could time and see, is my program faster or is your program faster? Or maybe my program is faster under certain conditions and your program is faster under certain conditions. So the real draw of technique, I think, is you do have a empirical and thus factual basis for saying like why one way of doing things is better than another thing. So the whole first part of the Technological Society book, then this is why Jacques Ellul was talking about how technique has basically won. So why do we see the Technological Society today? Basically because of the effectiveness of technique. So empirical learning, however you want to define how technique is advanced, this has allowed the Technological Society to become increasingly technological as the societies that adapt more of this technique stuff are able to steamroll over other civilizations, basically. Right, Reaper says, so let's make a strange loop. Star Trek in the late 1960s, a spaghetti western in space, inspired most younger workers of NASA today. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the pop culture stuff is extremely influential in telling people what is cool to do, right? Probably on this stream we've talked about cyberpunk and stuff like that. Probably like a lot of depictions of like hacking and stuff in movies where it's, if you do technology stuff for a living, it might be kind of funny and goofy, but seeing just that aesthetic of understanding systems, finding little exploits, stuff like that, it's probably gotten a lot of people interested in technology. And probably it's on a certain level it is by design, right? The movies will seed people's consciousness thinking about new ideas, what would be cool, and then people will go ahead and they will fill those roles. I mean, I'll just bring up, for example, there was this fairly recent movie, this Hidden Figures movie. I think I watched it while I was in an airplane. Anyways, this movie was like promoting black women, African American women, to showing how they heroically acted in NASA to help make space stuff go. So you could look at how film and things like this could be used to try to draw and promote. Maybe young black girl wouldn't have thought of being NASA Fed, but like now she sees this and it's like, oh yeah, it looks like being a NASA Fed would be a pretty cool thing to do. So movies, stuff like this, right, could be very useful. Jared says, Alan, have you seen Neon Genesis Evangelion? Yes, I have seen Neon Genesis Evangelion. I have seen this famous anime. That has a bunch of like occult stuff and technology stuff. There's this funny video. Well, let's use DuckDuckGo and we'll search Neon Genesis Evangelion. There's this funny video. You could go and search it out.
Please. Deep research approximation once again.
What do you think?
The elite are all about transcendence and living forever and the secrets of the universe, and they want to know all this. And we're on this planet, and it's trying to get up into the third dimension that's just a basic level consciousness to launch into the next levels.
All right, Reaper says, let's see. So talking about Star Trek, he says, Star Trek's economic system is billed as post-capitalist with no scarcity, everyone working together. Also, the Federation is clearly a reference to the U.S. or West helping other countries in a big man kind, generous way. Yeah, I've heard like Star Trek is UN propaganda or EU propaganda or something. I've heard that being said. Yeah, this whole so there's a term for this. It's a post-scarcity society. When I search this term, I'm going to find like all sorts of science fiction talking about this. Like, look, I'm on the Technocracy Wiki. Post-scarcity describes a hypothetical form of economy or society often explored in science fiction in which things such as goods, services, and information are free or practically free. This would be due to an abundance of fundamental resources, matter, energy, and intelligence, in conjunction with sophisticated automated systems capable of converting raw materials into finished goods. So, people have written pages and pages about this sort of stuff. Reaper says, so what NASA people cared about in 1969, a few years after JFK's speech, might be transcendental, but might also be pro-capitalist, anti-communist, i.e., anti-Soviet Union because of Sputnik. Yeah, well, it's, nothing wrong with a person wanting to serve their country in the best capacity they can. Jared says, I love Hidden Figures. There's some fun moments in that film. Reaper says, but today there might be quite a shared universal set of beliefs tied to the aggregate of utopian sci-fi in preceding 5 decades. And to tie this into a little, thank you for helping me do my homework, Reaper. Star Trek shows a future with lots of advanced tech, but people are still humans, and the human race not suffering in a deep way. Thus, when trying to understand some of what is going on right now, you could say a ton of the people building the current tech that some people see as possibly problematic are following a kind of template where they believe it will cure all problems and bring people together. Suffice to say, they're totally drunk on the Kool-Aid. Yeah, Reaper, I'll just bring up one thing that I didn't get to bring up on another stream yet, I think, but I had it open in a tab, which is the Star Trek, the Borg race, because you could think of a sort of dystopian vision of the technological society would be if people essentially assimilate and become the Borg. So part machine, part man, not very smiley and happy. But if everybody is the Borg, they're plugged into a grid, and the Matrix is administering them like happy chemicals, then resistance is futile, just like the technological society will march on, right? So maybe I haven't really watched much Star Trek, but you could maybe a good embodiment of the technological society potential endpoint is the Borg. Here it seems like they got some giant monolith thing. They're technologically superior. Here's some Borg interfacing with the device. There's Borg man. There's some more Borgs. So a big collectivist machine. oh no, how do we stop from becoming the Borg? How are the Borg stopped? I'm not a Trekkie, so I don't know how the Borg have been stopped and or held off in the Star Trek series. But that's to say, if we're going to talk Star Trek, it seems like this Borg race would be a embodiment of what Jacques Ellul might be saying the technological society is trending to. Whereas, yeah, if you look at the protagonists of the Star Trek crew, right, you get people from different backgrounds and stuff, and they might be trying to find some sort of balance, some solution that isn't just Borg assume all. Reaper says, right, and like Voyager saved 7 of 9 from the Borg, communism, and brought her back to humanity, capitalist individualism, which he matter-of-factly preferred. Yeah, now, so one, I think an interesting issue brought up by Jacques Ellul, the technological society, is to say that, for example, the USSR, or even you could say Western Europe or the United States in the 1950s, maybe these stages of society are transitory stages. So it's like at the start of the Industrial Revolution, you start to industrialize, it's going to be really rough. A lot of stuff is going to be very hard and unpleasant. Then maybe you kind of get to like this high point where people are benefiting from the material advances that come from the technology. So there's a lot of prosperity that's produced from the increased efficiency of labor. But where the Jacques Ellul book, I think, is interesting for its time in the 1954, is then it's going beyond that to say, all right, now let's say that we keep on doing this thing. We keep on increasing the efficiency of processes. We keep on developing the technological society. Then he's taking this idea further along until its logical conclusion at the end. So I haven't watched enough Star Trek and stuff to really comment about specifics, but one thing to say would be maybe the ideal presented with a show series like Star Trek and its various iterations is like, all right, when technological society was at this stage, then that was kind of like the happy place stage to be. But we don't want to go over the cliff and become the Borg, and likewise we don't want to become like anarcho-primitivists and go back. So maybe there's like a sort of happy place of technological society. Maybe that's one way to take Jacques Ellul's work here and say, right, maybe we should try to make certain things more and more efficient, but then at a certain point we pull the brakes and say, okay, now we don't care about optimizing and making things more efficient anymore, because if we actually go down that path, that's not the right direction. So you could develop technology in these areas, but let's basically pull the brakes and just try to stabilize or equilibrate somewhere. Maybe, you're put in a position to make these sorts of decisions. Maybe that's your sort of answer, to say, pause efficiency maxing here and just sustain a good equilibrium. I don't know, maybe. Okay, Reaper says 7 of 9 clearly represents the fallen potential of 1930s Germany being rehabilitated by 1950s Western capitalism. All right, we're getting a Star Trek analysis here that I don't understand, but I'm not going to disagree. I mean, you're probably right that these parts, characters, whatever you're talking about, were directly written to be these things that you're saying. Okay, question. Reaper says, what would Ellul say about cryptocurrencies and NFTs? Yeah, so that's why I was bringing up this DAO stuff at the beginning. I thought it was very interesting because the DAO will directly be related to the cryptocurrencies and maybe even the NFTs. Okay, so the DAO, you could think it's called Decentralized Autonomous Organization. Think of this thing as kind of like pure technique. Like, it's not a person that's directing an organization or whatever. Rather, you could think of the whole organization as code. So it's not laws code, it's not infrastructure as code, it's not computer instructions as code, it's just like everything as code. So as long as the DAO has a society to run on, it's like a program that could run autonomously in a particular society, a particular civilization. So if you could have like a decentralized autonomous organization that keeps track of money transparently. Now, how would it keep track of money transparently with like a publicly viewable ledger, stuff like that? It would be cryptocurrency. And then, for example, let's just say a DAO, it has some means to like say who is a member at various sorts. Well, if you have like NFTs, membership badges, something like that, and the DAO has rules by which you could give out like membership badges, distribute this money. If you donate this money, this such and such happens, right? It's like a whole organization that could be code, that could be programmed. And then you say like, oh yeah, they made up this, let's say a DAO to associate with, let's just say you have one that's associated with a national park. And this DAO, putting it in place, it has really allowed, let's say, Yosemite National Park to thrive. So people say, wow, it's a success. Then you literally copy and paste the code for that, and then you put it for like another national park or like another country, right? People might say, oh, the structure for this DAO, it was really successful in helping us manage this thing in a way that pleases a lot of people. So let's actually literally just copy paste this decentralized autonomous organization structure and then put it in different places. So the cryptocurrencies and the NFTs, and I'm saying the DAOs too, which will be kind of the glue that I'm seeing as one way of tying these things together. What these things represent is the further development of technique. So in this case, the DAO and the cryptocurrency and the NFTs, it's taken out a lot of people who would be in industries like the finance sector, or even like clerical type jobs or office bureaucratic type jobs. It's the automation of a lot of white collar type work. So interesting, like in the past, we've seen a lot of manual type labor went away because we developed more efficient techniques, machines and stuff. That meant right now that we have a chainsaw, you need less people like cutting away wood and brush and stuff, because one person with a chainsaw could be much more efficient. Or we develop all these tractors and stuff. So now it's not just people, you work the field like this, you go over it with a mechanized solution. With the machine, you could get the same work done in cheaper in a much shorter period of time. Now, in the same way, I think through cryptocurrency, DAO, all this sort of stuff, then what you're seeing is sort of, I'll call intellectual work, doing various calculations, paperwork, that sort of white collar type job. What we're finding is the means in which to automate a lot of that sort of job, and the computer is like technique par excellence, in the sense that it requires minimal human effort to run a computer program. Of course, to create the computer program, do all that sort of stuff, it's a lot of work. But if you could like literally just like play a YouTube video or something, it's very, very little effort on your part. Now, if launching a whole organization like a DAO or something like that could be as simple as recording a YouTube video in our current era, then you see, these society will become increasingly a technological society as more and more code-governed stuff, algocracy, comes to be the law of the land, effectively. So I think that is my reading on how Ellul would interpret these sorts of developments that we're seeing in our time. All right. Well, this stream has been going on for a while. It has been fun and it has been good. So I think I'm going to close up the stream. Thank you everybody for joining. Of course, if you have future topics and stuff you would like me to discuss, feel free to send them my way. Like, subscribe, do all of that. Yeah, I'll announce on my channel what the next topic will be, because we have finished reading the Technological Society. And I think, well, it took a long time, but it was a very informative read. So I'm glad we were able to do it.